and welcome to Up Front. I'm your host, Victoria Nestorowicz, and we're here today talking about the Lethbridge Airport. So first of all, we have Belinda Crowson with us, and she's going to talk about the history of the airport with us today. So can you tell me a little bit about the history of the Lethbridge Airport?
This is the fifth place in Lethbridge we've used for an airport. When airplanes first arrived in Lethbridge in 1911, just one airplane, it came to the Lethbridge exhibition. So in 1911 and 1918, the first two airplanes, that's where they landed and where they took off from. And in fact, the first airplane had to arrive on the train and then just use the exhibition for a demonstration. 1919, we had a small airport, airfield actually by Lethbridge, where LCI is today, for Captain Hoy's visit. Then we had one by the Lakeview subdivision, where that is today. And then we had a large one on the north side until the late 1930s. It became too small. So in 1937, the city bought land from the CPR south of town, which developed into the airport we know today. So this is our fifth airport, and it's been the airport for the past 80-some years.
Wow. Can you tell us a little bit about how the airport was used during World War II?
Right. So the city developed the airport. It was the Lethbridge Municipal Airport and then Kenyon Field. And then in 1939, when the Second World War started, very soon afterwards, the Canadian government and the British government created what was called the British Commonwealth Air Training Plan. And the idea was to train pilots, gunners, bombers from across the British Commonwealth and even Americans throughout Canada. Lethbridge was one of the sites chosen. And in 1940, they developed the No. 5 Elementary Flying Training School there, where pilots would come and learn the basics before moving on to other schools. Well, there was a little bit of a difficulty in that we have high winds. And if you're a beginner pilot, our winds usually won over the pilot's skills. So in 1941, they moved the elementary flying school up to High River, and it developed in Lethbridge instead the No. 8 Bombing and Gunnery School, which stayed until 1944. And this was a very large school, and during those 3 years, over 1,600 men were trained in bombing, navigation, etc., out at the Lethbridge Airport. And in those years, the government, the Royal Canadian Air Force, ran the airport.
And Lethbridge has its own regional airline and headquarters here in Lethbridge. Can you tell us a little bit about Time Air?
Absolutely. In the 1960s, what we would now think of as Air Canada was the only service between Lethbridge and Calgary. And what they did is they had a flight that came in from Calgary at 7 in the morning, and then about 30 minutes later, turned around and went back to Calgary. So if you had come into Lethbridge and you had meetings that day, you couldn't leave Lethbridge until the next morning. You had to stay overnight regardless of what you wanted. So Stub Ross thought that was inappropriate, and he started his own small airline called, eventually Time Air, went through a few name changes. Started with 3 employees in 1966, and he did 2 flights a day between Lethbridge and Calgary, a flight in the morning and a flight in the evening so that people had opportunity. And from that beginning, he developed a airline that had over 1,400 employees that was flying, many different places. And in the 1980s, 100,000 plus passengers were going through the Lethbridge Airport, with Time Air being one of the major reasons for it. Unfortunately, in the mid-1980s, Stub Ross himself passed away, and eventually Time Air was sold, and a lot of it was moved to Calgary and et cetera. And so by 91, we see a lot of changes as there's amalgamation of airlines, and by the 2000s, Time Air is essentially gone.
So previously, airports were owned by the federal government. And can you tell us a little bit about why the ownership was transferred to the regional and the community interests?
Right. So after the Second World War, the city still remained the owner of the airport, but they worked hand in hand with the Department of Transportation. And in the 1960s, the DOT took over ownership of the Lethbridge Airport. They held the ownership for about 30 years. And then with changes, they decided in the 1990s to get ownership back into the hands of local municipalities. So on January 1st, 1997, the DOT, the federal government, gave ownership of the airport to the County of Lethbridge, or Lethbridge County as we would call it today.
Can you tell us a little bit about the hangars around the airport?
Well, with a lot of the buildings were constructed in the late 30s, there are a few, but most of the buildings came with the British Commonwealth Air Training Plan in the 1940s. So we do have, not a few, but we have a few buildings that are still from the 1940s. Though a lot of them, those buildings were taken down, they were also moved. So I know somebody who took two of the buildings and put it together in a house outside Lethbridge. So if you know where to look, there's occasionally you can find those old buildings. But we do have a few from those days. And it's one of my great joys is I want to go out there, and I've said to several people, when somebody gives me an opportunity, I'm going out with a camera, because there are a few buildings standing, but there's also a few foundations of buildings out there. And we haven't really had a chance to do a real historic inventory of what's left and what's there. So it's actually one of my hopes is to get a better understanding of even the foundations that still remain.
And when was the current airport built?
After the Second World War, they took the old mess hall and developed it into the hangar. And that served for several decades until 1979. And the air terminal building that we have out there right now was built in 1979.
So do you believe that having the airport in a city like Lethbridge is vital to our economy?
Well, let's put it in historic terms. In the early 1900s, if you were trying to build a community and the railway bypassed your community, you often didn't survive. There was no way to get transportation for your community. In the 1940s, 50s, even today, if a highway bypasses your community, you'll see that community suffer, you'll see businesses suffer. And today, that major form of transportation that many of our businesses need is the airport. And so if you are looking to support your tourism industry, if you're looking to help visitors get in and out, help your public, your businesses, an airport is one of those essential pieces of transportation today.
Is there anything else about the history of the airport that you'd like to share?
Well, it's one of those funny things. It's that concrete structure across from the airport that was actually used during the Second World War, and is actually a very historic piece. And I'd love to get a plaque or something up on that building, on that site, so that people realize it's not a building that was torn down, but had a purpose to help in the siting during the Second World War.
Oh, wow. So do you have any hopes and dreams for the future of the airport?
Oh, I'd like to see it busier than it was in the 1980s. I'd like to see, businesses and the public actively using it and having it to be something that really regenerates a lot of the transportation needs of Southern Alberta.
Do you have any messages to the public about the Lethbridge Airport?
Let's all go for our flight. Sorry.
Go flying.
Yes. But yeah, basically, we have to work on the airport and we have to use the airport.
That is important in the community. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us today, Belinda?
No, I think it's interesting, right? The airport was built by the city of Lethbridge, and the city of Lethbridge is once again going to be a very strong part of the history going forward. So that's interesting to see how it all comes around.
Would you like a name change for the airport?
No, actually, Lethbridge Airport, I think, suits it nicely. There's certainly a regional aspect to it, so if we could incorporate more of the region, that would be nice. But this is something like the fourth or fifth name that the airport has had, and so it handles name change as well.
What was the first name of the airport?
The first name was Lethbridge Municipal Airport, and then within a year it was Kenyon Field.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Belinda. And thank you for joining us. We'll be up after the break with Mayor Spearman to talk about the future of the airport. Welcome back to Upfront. I'm your host, Victoria Nestorowicz. So before the break, we were talking to Belinda Crowson about the history of the airport. Now we're here with Mayor Chris Spearman, and we're going to talk about the future of the airport. So hi, Chris.
Good morning, Victoria.
So recently, the city of Lethbridge entered into an agreement to take over the ownership of the Lethbridge Airport from the county of Lethbridge. Can you tell me a bit about this agreement and why it was necessary?
Well, what we want to do is make sure that the airport reaches its full potential, and we want to enhance the passenger experience at the airport and get more people using our airport. We see the airport as being an important economic development tool for the city of Lethbridge. So when the county was operating the airport, and they've done a great job of operating it, but they have a limited capacity to invest in the airport. The city has a greater capacity to invest in the airport, and that's probably not good for taxpayers from one perspective, but on the other hand, What we want to do is leverage the investment in the airport. We want to attract provincial grant dollars and federal grant dollars. And in order to do that, you need to put up a matching component. We want to invest in the airport with 33-cent dollars from the municipality, but we think that investment will be justified in terms of incurring and encouraging more economic development, more jobs for the city and the region. And we want to make sure that Lethbridge can attract businesses and that we provide all the transportation facilities that a city our size should.
Can you tell me a little bit about some of the upgrades you might be doing at the airport?
Well, we have a detailed plan that's identified $30 million worth of upgrades, about $11 million in runway improvements, and about $19 million in facility improvements. So those would be expanding the capacity, passenger areas, providing washrooms in the waiting areas, basically making the airport facility a more attractive building for visitors, for passengers, and for people seeing their friends off and that type of thing. We want to make sure that the airport is a welcoming airport. So the facility is about 40 years of age, and really there hasn't been a whole lot of changes to the facility since it was first built. So it's very dated. And when you look at modern airports in other communities similar size to us, you see that they really focus on things like tourism. There's big welcome signs and a big component to it. So tourism is one form of economic development, but another form would be how do we support the industries that already live, that operate in the city, and businesses that already operate in the city. One of the expectations of customers these days is next day service. So if businesses in Lethbridge and industries based in Lethbridge want to sell to that kind of a market, you can never get next day service if we have to truck everything to Calgary before it's flown out of here. So what I see in a lot of smaller centers, similar size to Lethbridge, is they have air courier businesses located right at the airport. So, if we are able to achieve some success in that area, I think that will help overall our economy in the city and also make Lethbridge another source of possible investment attraction for businesses looking for next day service from smaller centers.
Can you think of any other ways that it would benefit the community?
Well, what we want to do, of course, is have a successful airport. We're hoping to get about 70,000 passenger flights a year. We want to enhance that and grow it. We know that we're losing about 80,000 flights a year, people driving to Calgary. And we also know that there's about 60,000 flights a year, people driving from the southwestern Alberta to Great Falls. When I've been visiting to other airports, places like Moncton, New Brunswick, and see that they have 700,000 passenger flights per year. That's a city with a population of about 72,000, serving an area of about 140,000. Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island, is a city of about 70,000. The island is a population of 142,000. They have 300,000 flights per year, passenger services per year. So, we have a lot of potential for growth here, and having a viable airport with competitive airline services will reduce fares and also create great connections to Calgary and flights beyond that. So the important thing is that businesses and people who live in the area use the airport. It's very important that we make our airport into a successful entity that supports and encourages economic development.
So are you hoping to be flying to places other than Calgary in the near future?
Well, the airlines have a hub and spoke model. What we want to do is, again, provide the best experience. What I saw in Moncton and in Charlottetown is they did have sun tours flying out of there. They were seasonal, so some of those were direct flights that occurred from mid-January to the 1st of May to Cancun, direct flights to Florida and other locations like that. That could evolve, but we'd have to first of all develop a base service and make sure that that base service is supported. So, there is that potential, And we will be talking to our carriers about possible other alternatives, maybe a direct flight maybe twice a week to Vancouver. In the meantime, what we really need to do is support the model that they have, which is really Lethbridge to Calgary and then Calgary and beyond. But the advantage is that you don't have all the hassles of driving to Calgary, parking up in Calgary, having to do clearances in Calgary where there are that many more passengers. And we want to do is make sure the services we offer at Lethbridge Airport are going to be quick and efficient and easy to deal with.
So recently, WestJet opened up their operations here in Lethbridge, and Air Integra has ceased their operations. Do you feel that there's room for different carrier companies to come into Lethbridge?
We'll see. I think we need to support the two main carriers that are both here. It's very important to support competition. There may be some challenges in terms of getting Integra to reignite in September. There's some talk that they will. If they do, that's great. If they don't, then we have to work with our existing carriers to make sure that we have a viable connection service to Edmonton. The Integra provided a great service, and I'd be delighted if they started up again and provided those direct flights to Edmonton. But if they don't, maybe one of the two carriers will provide something similar.
And how did the deal with WestJet come about?
Well, WestJet's been looking at expanding their services. I think they see there's some potential. Air Canada already had maybe a slight advantage for those that wish to fly and connect. So having WestJet come here and provide a similar service is great. The number of passengers is about the same. So Air Canada provides 5 flights a day from Lethbridge, about trying to think, they're 19 seaters, I believe, so close to 100 passenger capacity. And WestJet is providing 3 flights a day with a jet that will accommodate 34 passengers. So it's about the same passenger volumes each. And I'm hoping that we will fill both services and continue to promote and encourage competition, and therefore lower fares for people who live in southwestern Alberta.
And what will the benefits be for the city of Lethbridge itself with the airport?
Well, the emphasis is on economic development, supporting the growth of existing businesses and existing industries. We want to make sure that our transportation networks are ones that continue to support growth. So it's not just highway systems, it's not just rail systems, it's air systems as well. And in terms of promoting tourism and in terms of attracting major events to the city of Lethbridge in the future, we need to have viable airline service. Very difficult for us to attract events successfully if we have to bus people down from Calgary. So we need to provide effective and convenient air service.
So can you tell us a little bit about the YQL Liftoff project and the YQL Airport Master Plan?
Okay, I understand the master plan. The master plan is one that we have developed in conjunction with a consultant. We received funding, at least the County of Lethbridge did, and so the master plan has been developed, which does detail what the capital improvements are that are needed, and it gauges how we currently operate the airport. So we want to look at the master plan. We want to do some double checks. We want to make sure that the master plan is effective. We want to make that available for community consultation and get some feedback from the community about whether the master plan is something that they think is relevant and important. I have to say that last year we had some consultation that took place in the development of the master plan. So we had about 600 businesses in the city participate and over 1,500 residents telling us what they wanted to see in air service. And so now that the master plan has been developed, the question is, did we get it right?
Mm-hmm. Is there a project timing for the master plan?
I think, well, it has to go through the budget process, and there's going to be some capital allocations that are required, and then we have to monitor the operating. Right now, the County of Lethbridge is going to continue to operate the airport for the next 18 months, and we have to look at what the models will be going forward. We have to look at models that are used by other airports and determine how we can get people, in terms of governance of the airport going forward, It may not be in the best interest to have City Council be the governors. We may want to have an independent group governing the operation of the airport to make sure that it's very industry focused.
So, do you believe that biannual events like the Lethbridge Airshow generate interest in aviation in Southern Albertans?
They definitely do. You can just look at the attendance at the air show, and if we get great weather, we get huge crowds over the 2.5 days. I think they expanded it to last year, so they had it on Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday. But huge crowds come out and watch the event, and certainly it brings people out to the airport. It makes people aware of the importance of the airport, and it's a great tourist attraction as well.
How can the city attract new users to the airport?
Well, we really need to make sure they have a positive experience when they use the airport. So we have limited holding areas for passengers. We don't have washrooms in there. The wait times are getting longer because people have to arrive at the airport sooner. The federal regulations with air, so we need to make sure that we're providing accommodations to passengers that make the visit experience a very positive one. We need to make sure we maybe have food services and other amenities available to them and make that experience as positive as possible. We need to address, make sure we provide facilities for passengers who have physical impairments, and make sure that our washrooms are upgraded and we meet all the current standards. We're talking about a 40-year-old facility, and we need to make sure that the spaces are large enough and adequate to serve both airlines simultaneously if necessary, and that visitors are not inconvenienced and don't leave the airport with a poor experience.
And is there any plans, or do you have any ideas on how to make it more affordable for people to travel to Calgary via the airport?
Well, airfares have come down. I would encourage people to check the airfares. Flying to Calgary is sometimes, that's probably the least economical thing to do. It's very easy to get in a car and go to Calgary or use another form of transportation. But when you're going beyond Calgary, you basically find that the flight out of Lethbridge, the price difference is not much different than the flight out of Calgary. So I strongly encourage people to use the airport. If we don't use the airport, if something should happen that one or both of the airlines pull out, and we saw the Air Canada pulled out of Red Deer just this week, but when the airlines pull out, and if we don't have a viable, functioning airport, that really will be harmful to our economy going forward into the future. Will make it difficult for us to attract new businesses, difficult to attract major tourism events, and we need to make sure that the airport is viable and a very attractive place with a positive visitor experience.
Is there opportunities for the public to provide feedback for the future of the airport?
Yep, we're continuing the public engagement process, and the Operation Liftoff is where you can respond at the airport. What do you want to see at your airport? We certainly will be continuing to listen to the opinions of business and the public in terms of their airport experience, and we want to make sure it's positive and that we are effective in responding to what people are looking for.
And are there any plans? Are there any plans to change the name of the airport?
Not at this time. I think the focus right now is working with the public, the businesses, and the carriers. It's very important that the carriers believe that we are providing a high level of service too. I think we want to have positive relationships with both WestJet and Air Canada, and we want to support them in attracting passengers to their flights.
And what do you see, what is one of your dreams for the Lethbridge Airport, if you could have anything?
Well, I would like to see Lethbridge Airport grow and expand beyond the two existing carriers. I would like to see direct flights from Lethbridge to other areas, but I think we have to concentrate on our core business first and support the business models of the two airlines. When we can demonstrate that the airport is viable, I think we can add additional experiences.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any final thoughts to share with the public?
I think our plans to enhance the airport, focus on that, are probably one of the best decisions we've made in some time, like similar to the relocation of the rail yards and the development of the downtown back in the 1980s. But recognizing the airport as a significant asset and investing in it and promoting our airport is going to be something that could be a game changer for the city of Lethbridge. We need to have a viable airport. We need to have positive experiences for the guests that come here, whether they be business or tourists, and we need to make sure that the airport is part of our positive experience.
Well, thank you for joining us, Mayor Spearman, and thank you for watching Up Front. I'm your host, Victoria Nestorowicz, and have a great day. Until next time.